at my church, there's a sermon, and the title was No Pain in Vain. And the sermon was about how God uses the challenges and uses the trials and uses the tunnel to build you and mold you and refine you. And you have to trust that.
Welcome to the King's Code Podcast. Welcome to the King's Code Podcast. My name is Raul Villacis, and today we're going to talk about the importance of leadership for the young generation. And I have here in this podcast a young man that I have the privilege and honor to coach and mentor, Mr. Matthew Iglesias. Welcome to the King's Code Podcast, brother.
What an absolute honor. I mean, the story goes back quite a bit, and we'll dive into it. But to kind of look back to when we first met to now.
I mean, you reached out from social media one time, and you actually had an interview with me here in this. So it's going to be interesting to see the contrast of your interview when you were interviewing me the first time to having this conversation together.
Yeah, no, it's insane. It's insane. Honestly, like when I look back, it's almost indescribable how there's certain things that happen. There's like a perfect coincidence almost. Right, and honestly, I've grown to like not believe in coincidences.
I was gonna say that there is no coincidence in life.
Right.
I mean, from the first time that you and I met, we met at a Gary Vee event. I remember in New York, right? So, what was going through your mind when you were at that event?
Yeah, so I was 17 at the time, and I on all my social medias when I was a teenager, when I was underage, I put them all as my mom's birthday because I didn't want any limitations on what I could see.
You wanted to see the good stuff. That's why.
Right, yeah. So, YouTube and social media, they viewed me as like a 40-plus-year-old who's like interested in business, right? Which is, the kind of ads
the target audience that I have,
the Edge targets, right? So I would see all those ads all the time, and despite being 17, I was like, wow, these are really good. Like I would whenever I'd be watching a video, if I saw one of your ads come on, I would actually stop to watch it. Because I was like, this is actually really good,
It's interesting because a lot of people don't use the power of advertising enough.
Right.
I mean, I've gotten, stopped on the street because of the ads that I put on. I've gotten, people recognize me. And I think that that's something that a lot of business owners don't understand, that there's power in social media. There's power in you advertising. As long as you have a message that's authentic, as long as you have a message that's real, people are going to recognize the authenticity.
No, absolutely. And that point right there is like one of my absolute favorite things. And probably the number one thing that sticks out about, what you do. And I have to take a second to acknowledge you for this, is everything about the Edge brotherhood, the program, the content, the training, the events, everything from absolute A to absolute Z, like is the definition of authentic and genuine. And a lot of you guys watching this are likely, part of the brotherhood. I've been following Raul for some time, and there's no doubt in my mind that you have felt that as well, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, it just means that you haven't consumed enough of it, and you have to come out and actually see what this is, because really nothing like it. And I mean, with the power of social media in the modern world, it just allows us to amplify that, right, and get it out to more and more people and serve more people at a higher level.
Because it's hard, when I started putting these messages out there, it's hard to find your voice.
Right.
We just finished a leadership summit, this past week, and I was sharing the story of how my first videos was the polished version of Raul, with the white shirt, the reading glasses, talking to the camera, talking about, hey, let me show you how to find the edge. Let me show you how to go to the next level. And it didn't resonate because it wasn't me. I wasn't being authentic. I wasn't being real. I was portraying a persona that I thought people wanted.
Right.
As opposed to being who I know I could be. So it wasn't until I gave myself the permission to say, you know what, I'm gonna go in. I'm gonna do what I need to do. I curse, here and there. I've learned, now as I mature to curse less. But that's who I am. That's who I am. I joke around. English is my second language. My father gave me a box of tapes one day. He was from working in the Bronx. I know you're familiar with the Bronx.
Right.
You're from the Bronx.
Born and raised in the Bronx.
He used to work at a body shop in the Bronx, and he came back one day with a bunch of tapes, and he said, "Mijo, you want to learn how to speak English?" So yeah, listen to these tapes. And in the tapes, it was gangster rap, Ice-T, Ice Cube, and every single night I will listen to that music, and that's why cursing is embedding in my DNA, man. So we gotta go
the foundation.
Yeah, that's it. So we met at the Gary Vee.
Yep.
You were there. How did this relationship
start? so essentially, I'd been watching your ads, and I saw you going up onto the stage, and I was like, oh, I think that's him, right? And I've actually had many moments in my life like this, professional, and like, when it comes to like an opportunity in front of me, like business-wise, and it also goes to like romantic as well, right? You stick a girl in front of you, and you're like, oh, like should I do it? Should I not do it? I've had many moments like that where I'm like, should I not do it? But just like hearing like the voice, right, which is like what you talk about all the time. We're just like, no, you have to do it. You have to do it. You have to do it. But sometimes we don't have the courage to listen to the voice, right? You said this at the Leadership Summit, is that a lot of men have callings, but they don't listen, right?
Yeah.
And so I had that in that moment, like, oh, you should say something to this person. But at the time, I was like too scared to actually do it. But thankfully, and this goes to the power of proximity, I had my friend with me, Brian, and he's like, no, you should do it. You should do it. You should do it. And he pushed me and he pushed me and he pushed me. And a lot of men need that now more than ever, is like when they hear the calling, having a brotherhood around them to actually give them the permission and give them the push to actually like listen to it, right? And so, by the grace of God, Brian was there and pushed me to do it. So then I went up to you, I was like, hey, I said, are you running ads right now? And you were like, yeah. And I was like, man, like I love your ads, etc. And you asked me like, oh, like how old are you? I was like, oh, I'm 17. You're like, oh, where do you live? I said, I'm from the Bronx. And you were like, yeah, I have an event in Connecticut this weekend. So it was like, again, like divine timing, coincidence, whatever you want to say, right? I have an event this weekend in Connecticut. Yeah, you should come. You could come and like be my guest. And I was like, oh, okay, right? So I go to the Leadership Summit that weekend thinking that it was just going to be like another business event, right? Because at that point, I had been to a handful of different events. I'd been doing business since I was like 15, reading a bunch of books, going to different events, the whole 9 yards, right? And so I was thinking it'd just be another business event. So I show up, I pull out my laptop, I sit in like the front row, I'm there ready to take a ton of notes, ready for like a, whiteboard presentation. And that was mistaken.
That's not what we do. That's the opposite of what we do.
Yeah. I put the laptop away fairly quickly.
Lucky they didn't see the laptop. I would have probably, taken the laptop, confiscated the laptop until the end. I didn't know that was you in the front with the laptop. Or probably the team, told you, listen, this is not the type of event. Put the laptop way before the laptop gets broken.
Right. Yeah. That was not the right call. But by the end of that event, I was just like completely like crying, just like completely just like opened up. And at that time, being 17, I was like relatively closed off to like going deeper on things. I hadn't really had any experience with that. And when it came to like my personal like family life at the time, my brother and I had a very, very rocky relationship kind of growing up. Never really like were close or had that sense of like, you're my brother, I have your back, like I got you, I love you. We never really had that kind of camaraderie, that kind of relationship. But at the Leadership Summit, by the end of that, I remember just like the overwhelming feeling of like, this is what it actually means to like have a brother, like and have brotherhood.
Yeah.
And I'd never experienced that before, despite, my entire life having a brother. And having, not only a brother, but also mentors, right? Yeah. And like, that like male leadership in my life. Because, growing up, my mom and my dad separated fairly early. And so spent a lot of time being raised with my mom, being raised with my grandmother, and then also going to school with all female teachers. And as a kid, until I got to high school, I didn't really play any sports. So pretty much throughout the majority of my life up to that point, really had like no male leadership in my life. It was like all female leadership, which is a massive epidemic that we see today, is young men growing up without, father figures or strong father figures. And so, with that being said, by the way, I absolutely love my dad. He poured into me a ton growing up as well, but just due to the separation, just didn't really have the physical presence.
But that's where the challenge is right now with this country. America leads the way on the percentage of how many families have absent fathers.
Right.
And just like, I believe an absent father is not somebody who just, leaves the house and gets divorced, so is no longer with the kids. An absent father is also a man who's at home but is not present. that is only focusing on maybe his business or the things that he has to do, and the kids are not connected. There's lack of connection.
Right.
And that's why when you come to Leadership Summit, one of the things that I teach is emotional fitness.
Right.
Emotional fitness is not about just working on your feelings. It's using your feelings a certain way to fuel your purpose. We have one of my favorite T-shirts is pain to fuel. Right. So use all the pain that you have. I use all the trauma that you have. I use all the things that in the past maybe you thought they were wrong or they shouldn't happen, and I teach men how to use that as fuel so you could fuel your purpose. So that's why you were emotional, because you realize, like, shit, I haven't dealt with all these emotions. I haven't dealt with the abandonment or the separation. I haven't dealt, and I could relate because that's what happened to me. I came to this country when I was 11 years old, and my parents came here, and I was without parents for 5 years. And imagine a little kid without parents being left in Ecuador.
Right.
I didn't deal with that shit until I was in my 30s.
Right.
I had to deal with that and use that emotional pain to fuel who I was as a man.
Right.
And I think a lot of young men right now, they have a lot of trauma, a lot of insecurities because they're not taught how to be emotionally fit. So now you came to this event, you realize it's not a computer type of a laptop type of event. It's more of like, let's get down to look under the hood. Because that's something that we do here at the Next Level Experience with the Edges. Let's look under the hood. Let's see what are the patterns that keep you stuck. Let's see what some of the shit that you're going through that you don't want to face. What's your darkness? What's your pain? What you're struggling with? And once you discover you have the awareness, then we start using some framework to see how can we connect the dots and take it to the next level.
Right. And one thing you said there that I want to point out is, like, you said, I didn't deal with that until I was in my 30s, right? And I feel like that's a huge unfair advantage that I've had, right?
100%.
Being
100%.
exposed to so young, right? And like being able to experience things like the ritual and all the different processes that like you bring the brotherhood
That's
through.
why when I saw you, I mean, I said, I wish I would be in this room at 17 years old. That's what I said. Come to the event. And I told you, this is probably going to be the best event that you're going to have. Why? Because I know that the amount of men that are there that would love to pour in young men was going to be effective.
That was one of the biggest things for me. Is when I left that event, the quality of the guys in the Edge Brotherhood, I think, is massively like under advertised. And like most of you watching this probably don't know unless you're in the Brotherhood. But the quality of guys in the Brotherhood, it opened my eyes incredibly to what's possible, right? Because not only is the Brotherhood full of very successful businessmen, right, from that perspective, but also guys that are pouring into their marriages, right, into their kids, into their health, into their faith, into their spirit, really like living and pursuing an integrated life in all aspects. And so seeing these men who were leaders in every way, right? Running teams, leading their wives, leading their kids, allowing God to guide them despite, being leaders everywhere else, surrendering in that space and being able to, cry and like get really real and raw about like where they were at. It just exposed me to not only what's possible, but also what's real, right? Because you talk about like the modern age, young men nowadays, most of them have the people that they're around, which for the most part is not going to be that great, be low quality people that they're around most likely, right? And they have social media, right? All they see on social media is the highlights, the Playboy lifestyle, all these things that, really what we're doing with the Edge Next, which we'll get into, is bringing, guys away from that and showing them what's
just
real.
Just bringing awareness.
Right.
I mean, because that's one of the things when the men come to the program, and I'm sure many guys who are listening to this, you followed me for a while, this is at the end a business mastermind.
Right.
I want to make sure that you guys understand that what's stopping them is not what they don't know about business, is what's holding them back to execute on things that they know. And you heard this many times before.
Right.
I know what to do, I'm not doing it, right? So what we do is we work with them to help them get unstuck on whatever it is subconscious, whether it's conscious or subconscious beliefs that gets them unstuck. And one of the things that I've been called to do is really work with high performers, leaders, men who are running companies. Why? Because I believe those are the men who are going to impact the world.
Right.
One man that I coach is equivalent to 1,000 men.
Right.
So if I have a room of 100 men, have an impact of 100,000 people.
Right.
And you're the product of that, because a lot of men pour into you without even being intentional, because they wanted to, not because they're part of a program, not because they have to do it, not because they're paid to do it, just because that's who they are. They want to give, they want to pour. And I think that's where a lot of the times when I hear from people say, "Man, there's not enough mentors. I don't have people, to help me." It's like, have you reached out? Are you reaching out? I mean, there's so much resources out there,
Right.
but there's not a structure yet where young men could go and get some help from people who don't want to take advantage of them, whether it's financially or emotionally, where men are real about the situations as opposed to hiding their intentions, or truly want to give back. Why? Because when I see you, I see my son. Like my son is 18 years old, right? So a lot of guys probably relate to you. I was like, man, if my son was your age, I would like to have somebody help them the same way I'm helping you.
Yeah, and I think what comes to mind there for me is something that you say all the time, which is there's no shortage of information, none at all, especially now. But what there is a shortage of is connection, and association and accountability, and that's like what the brotherhood gave me. Because at the time I was reading all the books, I was taking all the courses, I was going super deep. But like you said, like you can know what to do, and a lot of people do know what to do. They listen to a podcast all day, but they don't do it, right? They're lacking the connection, the accountability, the association, and that's what you've built and what you've done, and it's amazing. And I've been incredibly blessed to be a part of it for the short time that I have. I mean, over the past, it goes back to 2019. So what is that now?
So I want to take you back to that moment. So what made you? You talked about proximity. Somebody pushed you, right? Okay, you have to talk to this guy. Okay,
Right.
so now I invited you to come to Leadership Summit.
Right.
Every Leadership Summit, I make an intention to invite young men, right? And some young men take the invitation. Some young men don't take the invitation. Some young men think that I'll do it later on, right? So you came, but you're one of those young men that actually implemented some of the things that we talked about.
Right.
So talk to us about how did you implement and what did you implement in your life after learning some of the things that we teach?
Yeah. So I would say two things. There were two really, really big things that I implemented after that. Number one was like the 100-day framework, right? And like taking life 100 days at a time, setting clear outcomes, and like pursuing and attacking those 100 days, right? And being mindful of the 4 Bs, right? So I remember at the time using the app, which some of you guys watching this use the app, you know what it's all about. Some of you may not, and I highly recommend looking into it and downloading the Edge app. If not, but being conscious of the 4 Bs and knowing that business wasn't the only thing that mattered in life, right? There was my body, my being, and my bonds that needed attention as well.
And
right?
it's crazy to say that because guys your age, they only looking, let me get paid and let me get laid, right? the business, the money, and the woman, right?
Right.
And as you get older, you realize that, man, you have to have a strong foundation. And I believe the 4 Bs is like the foundation of the kingdom. Your body, which is your health, your being, your connection with God and spiritual connection, your business, your ability to make money, and your bonds, which is your relationship, right?
Right.
So you took that into consideration. Okay, now I have to have a holistic approach of my life, 100 days at a time.
Right.
So tell us what happened. What are some of the results from that?
Yeah, so from that point, and also one thing I'll mention as well is the ritual.
Oh yeah, that's the secret sauce. Though.
Yeah,
that's the secret sauce. Most people who listen to this and think ritual, what is that? You have to be there to learn it. But it's a mindset process.
Right. Yeah, it's incredibly difficult to explain. I mean, a lot of what we do here is incredibly difficult to explain, but that was.
But just to give it some context, the ritual is something that I've created I've been practicing for the last 15 years. It's like my morning routine.
Right.
But I call it a ritual because a routine is something that you could get off and you get off. A ritual is something that you hold sacred, right? A ritual is something that you respect. A ritual is something is important. So that's why I call it a morning ritual, because for me, I have to do it as a ritual. It's more like a mindset exercise that gets me to go from 0 to 100 every single day.
Right. Yeah. So that was incredibly like regrounding and centering for me whenever I would face challenges, right? Because the Bible talks about storms will come, right? There's a passage in Matthew about Jesus talking about building your house on the rock versus the sand, but in both those scenarios, he's saying when the storm does come, right, your house either built in the rock or the sand. It's not a question of, if a storm comes, it's when it comes. So when the storms came, which they certainly did, the ritual was always a regrounding thing for me. But yeah, since then, I mean, I've done a litany of things. So 17 then, after that was running a marketing agency and doing all that stuff. And then I was about 19, 20. I think it was like 19 or so. Started actually working with you, Raul, doing a lot of the marketing and the ads here, and grew a lot of my knowledge and experience base there.
That's right. I remember pushing you.
Yeah.
I remember you telling you, man, listen, this is not going to be easy.
Right.
It's not going to be easy. Like people think, when they think, social media, when they think coaching, they think, oh, this guy's making so much money. Like, people are just watching him giving money. It's a process.
Right.
Like at the end, we're running a business.
Right.
And when you were running the marketing department, I was constantly pushing you. And I remember you saying, well, giving me certain excuses. And I said, I'm going to send you a t-shirt that says, fuck excuses, right? But then you leveled up. You leveled up, because that's what happens every single time that we bring in. I mean, Jay started with me when he was 18. Daniel started with me, he was in his 20s. And every single one of them, their lives completely changed because there's proximity. Because we have a high standard in the way that we operate. So I always knew that you had the potential. But I always say potential is not shit until you implement to get the results. Right. So that's why it prepared you for like the next stage of your life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was a foundational like building period, especially like once I started like working with you, being able to like get like direct proximity. Because up to that point it was just with the events, and now I kind of got like an insider experience, which was invaluable. But then after that, then I moved on from working here and transitioned into sales. So I have a great friend of mine, Caleb Maddox, and he's run a handful of different companies. And so we started working with him, and I was an integral part of scaling an offer from $0 to $4 million a month in cash collected sales in under 9 months, working in a bunch of different roles, from setting to managing sales teams, closing, a role called finishing, which most sales departments don't have, but similar to closing. The whole 9 yards. So we scaled that offer. We scaled multiple other offers to over $1 million a month. And so that was a huge kind of leap in my development there as well. So like the edge was like the foundation. And then once I got into that role, that's where all of the principles were like put to work.
Let me tell you, when you went to the sales business, it pissed me off, right? It pissed me off because I've been telling you, I said, you have this gift, Matthew. Right. You have this gift of talking to people, and you do it because you genuinely care. You're curious. Right. You're curious. You're constantly like gathering information, asking questions, right? So every single time you were in my marketing team, but I told you, get into sales. Get into sales. No, I don't want to get into sales. And you said, Raul, I have an opportunity to be in sales. It's like, all right, go. Because sometimes when you're ready, the teacher appears. And I know Matt, Caleb, Matt's his father, right?
Yeah, Matt's father. Yeah.
I know Caleb. I respect the hell out of him. He's a young man that I met before in ClickFunnels. Yep. We have a video interview where I interviewed him and my son, so I know he's doing big things. So when you told me that you'll be working for him, I said, absolutely, man. Like you can't get a better teacher from somebody, a young man that's doing it right now. So I was proud of you. I was proud of you. Actually, I was secretly jealous that you didn't jump into my sales team, but I was happy for you that you actually are taking the leap of what I thought was always in you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember many times you saying like, oh, you need to do sales, but I think at the time there was some uncertainty, right? And like, oh man, like doing something that's 100% commission, I don't know. But yeah, I certainly grew past that. Certainly. And honestly now, I mean, being 100% commission is way better. I mean, way
right? I mean, because you're in control of your destiny, man.
Yeah, 100%.
I remember with the first time I got a job in sales.
Right.
And they would pay me a salary. And the guy says, I could pay you a salary, I could pay you a commission. I said, which one am I going to make the most money on? He goes, commission. I said, give me the most commission you could give me, so don't worry about the salary. So give me the most, so I could be driven, because I was driven by, at that moment. I remember that I was 21 years old, knocking on doors, calling people from. Have you read the book, The Yellow Pages? The White Pages?
No.
Okay, you have to look it up. For some of the young guys who don't know, this book is gonna change your life. You're gonna make $1 million by reading this book. It's called The White Pages. All right, The White Pages is a book where it has everybody's name and phone number in it.
Right.
Right? My sales mentor said, listen, I'm going to give you a book, you'll make $1 million, the white pages. So every day I used to open up the book and call random people, cold call from
Right.
the white pages.
Right.
And that's how I made my first $100,000 from the white pages.
Wow.
Just making cold calling
Right.
people, selling real estate.
Yeah. I mean, I was never calling from the white pages, but
I don't think the white pages exist anymore. If you want a white page, you probably have to go to a thrift store to
Right.
find it.
no, man, like cold calling's a lot of fun. When you were pushing me to do it, there was a level of like resistance, but getting in the trenches and dialing for hours and hours and hours, objection after objection after objection, is formative. You know,
Builds your character.
Yeah, 100%.
It builds your character. It makes you tougher.
Right.
I mean,
absolutely. Just like dialing 10, 12 hours a day, you know, I remember, you know, when I was, I think I was 19 or 20 at the time, and I would leave the house. At the time I was living in my mom's house, and I'll leave the house maybe, I don't know, maybe like 9, 10 a.m., something like that, and I wouldn't come back till like 1 or 2 a.m.
you're paying the price.
You're
paying the price. That's exactly what I told you. If you want to be successful, because you asked me one time, bro, what does it take to be successful?
Right.
And I said, you got to pay the price.
Right.
There are no shortcuts. Pay the
Right.
price. You got to do it. Otherwise, you're always going to be hoping and wishing.
Right. Yeah. So that experience was invaluable. And so I was doing that for the past, I think like almost 2 years or so now. And then I moved to Arizona. So I lived in the Bronx, New York, moved out of my mom's house, was living in an area called Morris Park, which was a bit of an upgrade from the South Bronx, if any of you guys watching are familiar with New York City. And then I moved to Arizona because the company was based in Arizona. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go all in. I'm going to move to Arizona. The company had been, pushing me, all my friends, everybody's like, yo, you got to move here, you got to move here, you got to move here. I had some constraints, some attachments in New York that were keeping me here, but those, were no longer the case. So like, you know what? You're going to go all in. My lease was ending like at that very same moment. So again, it was like a perfect coincidence or like, the timing. So I moved to Arizona to go all in. And shortly thereafter, I started getting like a feeling, right? Like the voice was speaking to me. God was speaking to me and calling me into a different direction. It started with, hey, I think you should start your own business, right? That's how it started, right? But in my mind, I was like, well, I moved here for this, across the country from New York to Arizona. I moved here for this. Everything's good, money's good. The team, the company's great. All my friends are here. Like, why would I do this and then transition, right?
Yeah, but before that, you actually started, because I started, I always, continue to keep tabs on you and see like
Right.
how good you were doing, and we'll text, from time to time. But I remember you went through a transition of finding your faith. So talk to us about how, like, because I remember the Matthew that was, that left here. It's not the same Matthew that came back here.
Oh yeah, wow. How could I skip over that?
I mean, that's the
Yeah.
foundation. I mean, that's
Yeah.
that's the shift that I seen with you.
Yeah.
Is that you really found a type of faith that actually allows you to connect at a deeper level.
Absolutely. So at the beginning of this year, 2023, so 2022 was a phenomenal year. Everything was going well. I was in a relationship, just like making more money than I ever had before. All my friends are awesome. I was traveling like every other month. I was just living like just awesome lifestyle. Nothing was wrong. And towards the end of 2022, so I started learning about God and Christ. And I had a mentor. His name was Brandon. And at the time, I was actually opposed. Honestly, I was opposed to the idea of, following a specific religion. I acknowledged a higher power, but I was actually like against the idea. But I had a mentor, his name was Brandon, and the way that he talked about God and Christ was in a way unlike I'd ever really experienced it before. Because growing up in New York, it's a very liberal area, and a lot of I grew up in the Catholic Church, actually going to Catholic school, high school, and whatnot, and just the way it was like framed, the message was always kind of like scarcity based. I always found kind of in those areas, the community was that way, so it always kind of repelled me. But Brandon, on the other hand, always talked about God from like a perspective of like abundance and promise and like what's possible with God, right? And so that opened my heart, right? It kind of opened my mind. And from that open place is when he started to plant seeds, right? And started to plant seeds. And Brandon was very, very patient. He was very, very patient. He's never pushy or anything. He's very patient. And slowly but surely, like those seeds started to blossom. And then at the beginning of this year, I faced one of the biggest challenges that I've ever faced in my life, which was I had a herniated L5-S1 disc that's essentially left me bedridden. I had like incredibly painful sciatica that's made it pretty much impossible to walk or stand. Like walking or standing for anything longer than maybe 30, 60 seconds was very painful. There was many nights when I would go to bed and the only reason I would fall asleep is because I was more tired than I was in pain. So I would just lay in bed until I was tired enough to where I just fell asleep because it was excruciating. And there were many, at the time I was in a relationship, I remember a specific night, it was actually Valentine's Day. And, you know, Valentine's Day, you obviously want to do something nice, you know, with your girl and et cetera. But I was in the heat of that. And at the time I would sit on my couch with like multiple pillows propped up behind me. And I would just kind of sit like this, like stiff. And it was the only position that wasn't painful. And I remember like my girlfriend at the time was like sitting on the floor and we were like eating dinner. And it was like one of the most empty experiences because there was like, I felt completely emasculated. I felt like half a man because I couldn't do anything. I couldn't move. I couldn't really be there in that moment. And it was just extremely empty. And that ended up leading to that relationship actually ending, which was incredibly difficult as well. I found myself at that time just spiraling in a lot of different ways, like mentally, just spiritually, just like spiraling, and just finding myself in this really dark and empty place. But through all of that, God was pouring into me, right? In that moment, I've never like dug into my Bible so much, never prayed so much. That's when I was like really, really leaning and growing exponentially because being home, not being able to do anything, right? Because I was physically unable to move. I had my Bible in my lap.
How old were you back then?
That was 21.
21. Yeah. What I'm seeing is, we talked about the tunnel, right? I believe the tunnel is when men go through these hard times to be shaped and molded, right? And tunnel could also be midlife crisis. The tunnel could be the beginning of a transition between a peasant mentality that I talked about in my book to a warrior mentality. So what you went through is that tunnel from the peasant mentality to a warrior mentality to the threshold of pain. Right. And it's interesting how God uses our bodies when we're not paying attention, when we're not listening to the voice. He will use our bodies as a way to kind of give us the feedback. Say, hey, wake up. There's something that you have to pay attention to. And the back signifies that there's something holding you back. Emotionally, unconsciously, it's holding you back. So you were being held back. And maybe the relationship was supposed to end. But you were not strong enough to end it. So your body had to give up. Right. And sometimes when we don't take in consideration, like not what we want, but what God wants, we're always going to fight it, right? Because eventually His will is going to be done, and we're either going to pay the consequences, pay the price, or we're going to accept it and figure out how to find the gift. Because that ended up being a gift afterwards. Like, you were able to find the gift through your faith, because that's how God works. God is constantly making sure that He uses our pain to get us closer to our highest purpose.
Amen. I believe that and see that heavily in hindsight, heavily. Shortly after that, I remember a friend of mine, Aaron, sent me a voice note because at the time, like, business-wise, sales-wise, that was going down too. I was being less consistent. I remember like just waking up and just feeling empty, just kind of staring at the ceiling like, oh, just another day. And they were seeing that, right? And that's, again, goes back to the power of proximity. If I didn't have anybody around me to see those patterns, it probably would have went significantly longer. But I remember sending me a voice note. It was super long, but really the one thing that stood out to me, he said, Matthew, you have incredible talent. You have incredible skills. You have incredible potential. You're one of the most talented leaders I've ever seen. You're one of the most talented people on the phones I've ever seen. But you're allowing everything that's going on right now with your body, with your breakup, with XYZ, with this, that, and the third. You're allowing these things to hold you back, and you're dishonoring all of the opportunities, all the talents, all the gifts that God has placed in you. You're dishonoring them by allowing these things to hold you back. And when I got
powerful.
that, when
It's
I got
powerful.
yeah, when I got that voice note, it hit me. And after that, did the ritual, and that was like the switch. That was like really what cemented that for me in that transition, was hearing that, looking back on everything that's going on, did the ritual, and I was like, all right, let's go, right? So I moved to Arizona, and then started hearing the voice, right? Calling me in a different direction, away from what I was doing, but it didn't make any sense. You know, I moved to Arizona for this. I made a choice to be all in here, and everything was going well, right? But the more I rejected it, right? Like you were just saying, like, my will versus God's will, the stronger it got, the stronger it got, the stronger it got. And it actually manifested with a physical tightness in my chest, where literally all day I would wake up and immediately feel it, where it's like that feeling when you need to take a deep breath.
Yeah.
You get a sigh and you feel good. I would do that, but it wouldn't go away. That tightness would still be there. And it just got worse and worse. And then one day at my church, there's a sermon, and the title was No Pain in Vain. And the sermon was about how God uses the challenges and uses the trials and uses the tunnel to build you and mold you and refine you. And you have to trust that. And in that moment, I was sitting there in prayer and just looking back on how God's got me through everything else. And what I heard God speaking to me was, when I broke your body, when I broke your heart, when I broke your business, like, did I not get you through then? So when I'm calling you in this direction now, do you not trust me? Do you not see what I've already done for you? And now that I'm calling you here, I need you to trust me. Like, if I am your Lord, if I am your God, trust me and follow me, even when it doesn't make sense, even when you logically think it doesn't make sense, even in the world when it doesn't make sense, even in your flesh when it doesn't make sense, and you think you should go in a different direction. Trust me, I'm calling you. And I just broke down in that moment, crying in the middle of this huge church with hundreds of people, girls, all these different things. Where, for me, I want to be strong, right? I want to look like I have my shit together, like I'm good. But I had to lay all of that down in that moment and surrender to that. And that was the huge breakthrough for me, where I was like, God, take everything. Take my will, take my thoughts, take my desires, take all my pain, my anxieties, my fears, the scarcity that I feel, and just take all of it. And I trust you with wherever we're going. And in that moment, I surrendered to that call. And at that point, not only was it a call to start a business, but it was also a call. That call had grown into serving men, and young men specifically, and serving in that way. And there was a big piece of me that was like, oh, I don't know if I should go in that direction. Maybe I should do something else. But again, God was like, listen to me, listen to me, listen to me, listen to me. Right? There's a verse in the Bible. It says, lean not on your own understanding, and trust God with your full heart, mind, and soul. And so that was that moment for me of really laying that down. And then shortly after that, I think the following week, I reached out to Raul. I sent him a voice note. And I said, hey, Raul, I have something I really need to run by you. When can we talk? Right? And he said, oh, let's talk on Tuesday. I think it was like a Thursday or a Friday. And I was like, all right, done. Right?
Yeah, I remember that. Tuesday, 3:00, right?
Yeah, that's Tuesday, 3:00. And then it was like, all right, done. So I fly out from Arizona to Connecticut, and I show up, and
Tuesdays I don't come to the office. I work from home.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, here's a Zoom link. Let's meet up. I said, no, I'm in your office.
Right.
I was like, what are you doing in my office, man? You're in Arizona.
Right.
You're crazy enough to take a flight. So that's what I knew was serious. Like, oh shit, all right, I thought maybe you're gonna get married, or you want to ask me to be the what do you call it, ordained minister to marry somebody. I said, oh yeah, I didn't know that he's gonna get married.
Right. Yeah. No, it wasn't something that I could talk about on the phone. It was something that was extremely serious, because it was bigger than me. Right. there's many things that I've, walked in different business meetings, different sales calls or whatever. And it's, I'm always, thinking to myself, all right, what am I going to say? I'm going to say this, I'm going to say that. Here's how I'm going to maybe handle this objection that might come up, et cetera, et cetera. But coming here, honestly, flying here for that meeting was probably the biggest move of faith that I've ever had in my life, because there was no guarantees of anything. I could have flown all the way out here and had Raul tell me like, no, there was no guarantees of anything. Raul had no idea what was going on. But I said, God, if you're calling me this direction, I trust you. And I'll fly across the country to do this. And I trust that if it's your will, it'll be done. Even if it meant no, right? It's not, God, if it's your will, that's going to be yes. And if he says no, then I don't trust you. I trust you either way, right? And I think that's a big misconception a lot of people have, is that, God is only bringing you towards victory, right? But sometimes he brings you towards trial for your ultimate victory in his vision.
At the end of the day, that's where the trust comes in.
Right.
You trusted the fact that you were listening to go. Sometimes you have to go, but it doesn't mean that you're going to get what you want, but you're always going to get what you need.
Exactly.
So what was the conversation like? So share with the audience, like what you told me.
Yeah. So I came here and I told Raul a lot of the story that we've been talking about. And I said, what I want to do is I want to partner with you, because being a part of the Edge Brotherhood from 19, working with the company, the whole 9 yards, there's nothing that I've ever come across that even holds a candle to it, from the perspective of the value that is delivered here, the connection of the brotherhood here, and just really like what the Edge Brotherhood is. It's so unique, it's so special, and a lot of young men just don't have even like a fifth or a 5% of what this is. They don't have access to. And so seeing that in hindsight, right, and being able to connect the dots looking backwards, I've had an unfair, leg up. And a lot of young men are struggling right now with a multitude of things, right? On one end, you have a lot of guys who just lack purpose, clarity, direction, and guidance. A lot of them, didn't have, any sort of like leadership or a father figure in their life, so they're just lost in that way. Whether it means, they're, stuck being nice guys and like super soft and feminine, or they're just empty and just like, wasting their life on, going out to parties and, smoking, drinking, etc. Then on the other end of the spectrum, you have a lot of young guys nowadays who are killing it in business, right? And they're living the Playboy lifestyle. They're down in Miami, with e-com stores, Amazon stores, marketing agencies, digital businesses, and they're living life, getting paid and laid, right? Like we're talking about earlier, but don't know the trap and the dark hole that they're really truly digging for themselves, right?
And I find that those guys are hitting the tunnel earlier.
Right.
Like I hit my tunnel when I was 37, 38 years old, like the midlife crisis. I'm seeing now young men hitting that same tunnel in mid-20s, 27, 28. You have money, but then you don't have purpose.
Right.
Or you could get laid, but you don't have a woman that actually cares for you.
Exactly.
So, when you came to me with that conversation, I knew there was a problem that is an epidemic. We have that. It's a huge problem. But what you didn't know, as you were telling me this, I have been having this conversation with my inner circle members. We've been praying about like, how do we bring this message to young men? How do we bring? Because sometimes I won't be able to relate to a guy in his 20s or 30s. So I knew that I had to do something, but I didn't know what it was gonna be.
Right.
So when you came, and I was like, that's exactly what we've been praying for.
Yeah.
Like a liaison, somebody who's been part of the program, somebody who's a product of what we do, somebody who actually is living it. It's not about being perfect. Listen, we're not perfect, you're not perfect.
Right.
But we are in the trenches. We're in the battlefield. And I think a lot of young men need to know that being a man is a battle.
Right.
There's no way around it. You either become a weak man and sit in the sidelines and you watch the gladiators fight it off, or you get into the battle and find out who you are. Are you a warrior, or are you going to be a king? Because the battle is what shapes every man.
Right.
The battle is going to give you your trials, your tribulations. But unless you have the tools to have the emotional fitness, the tools to be physically fit, the tools to have business abundance, the tools to connect with your partner, you're not going to make it to the battle.
Right. Yeah, and that's what's lacking. That's what's missing. Is a lot of those other pieces, right? It's almost like showing up to the battlefield with like just a sword, or like no armor.
Yeah.
There's a lot that's missing. And that's what this is really all about, right? It's like looking at these young men on this spectrum, right? From this far left to the far right of those different extremes and everything in the middle, and seeing all the things they're missing and not factoring in, and being able to see a lot of the guys in the Edge Brotherhood who have been through the battle, right? And have been through wars and have battle scars on the other side, and are now in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. I don't know.
Not that old. Listen, it's 60s.
60s.
Don't get us to that yet. Not yet.
70s.
But no, there's some guys in their 60s that are outperforming guys in their 20s. I mean, you saw the workout that we had
for sure.
this past week.
Oh yeah, these aren't like your typical older. These are guys who are crushing it. But
we're like fine wine.
Right.
We're fine wine.
Right. But hearing their perspective, right, is like many of them, countless of them that I've spoken to are like, hey, when I was your age, I grinded to build this massive business, but now, what I ran into was XYZ with my family, XYZ in my marriage, XYZ, and I'm having to rebuild, and that's what I'm doing now, right? A lot of our guys have been able to rebuild because of what we do here.
Yep.
But my vision is like to help, or our vision, I should say, is to help young men build that from day one, right? Instead of having to go through all the party phase and the playboy and having to go through the 20s, 30s lost and misguided and not knowing what direction or purpose they had in their life, and missing faith. Like from day one, what's it look like with the 4 B's, right? Body, being, business, bonds. What's it look like to build a massive successful company? What's it look like to start preparing for and building a marriage, finding a wife, and preparing for a family one day, having kids? What's it look like to have a physically strong, fit body, right? Get jacked, get shredded, whatever your goals are there. And then lastly, what's it look like to have a deep relationship with God? What's it look like to actually surrender there and be guided and be able to not only hear God, but have the discernment and the courage and discipline to follow him as well.
Yeah. So this is what the Edge Next for me is, and why I'm so passionate about this project. For me, it's about legacy. Legacy. When I look at Matthew, when I look at the young men that have been through the program, like for me, this is exactly why I do what I do. Like I believe, and I tell my guys the same thing. We're not put here on this earth just for us to survive. We didn't come here just to play small. Like every single man that I coach is here to create a legacy. And the young men out there, they're craving for legacy. They're craving for mentorship. They're craving for leadership. That's what it means to be a man, being a leader. So if you're a young man right now and you're thinking, man, I don't have a father figure, a male figure, I don't have mentors. Well, now that's just a bullshit excuse. Because here you have a young man that's willing to step out for you. A young man that's willing to say, listen, I'm going to give you a hand. I'm not going to do it for you, but I'm going to help you see how you can find your code to the edge. See, I train men so they could find their code to the edge because they've had the edge. The Edge Next is about helping young men find their edge. Because at the end of the day, let's be real, you may not have the edge. You may not have what it takes to be a leader, but it's okay. At least you have right now an opportunity to find out.
Right.
Through the Edge Next, they're going to have an opportunity to see what they're made of.
Right.
Because sometimes, I believe 99% of men out there don't have the edge because they grew up being weak. Mm-hmm. They grew up being weak, and they had nobody to hold them accountable to a high standard.
Right.
So now imagine we could help this young man from the beginning have a strong foundation of values, principles, beliefs, and a blueprint. They could see, here's what to do, here's what not to do, here's how we fucked up in the past, here's the shit that we messed up on. You are going to have your own painful situations. You're going to have your own struggles, but at least you're going to learn from other people's struggles, so you're not going to make the same mistakes that other people made.
Exactly.
Or if you do make the mistakes, you know how to navigate through them.
Exactly. Like having a resource in a brotherhood to have everything that a young man needs really to excel and rise into the king of his life, right?
We're going to put a link here in this video. We're going to have my team put a link in this video about the Edge Next, to learn more about the Edge Next. So I believe that's the next generation of leaders.
Right.
And my brotherhood, it is so excited to be mentors, to be big brothers to the guys that you're bringing in. Like
Absolutely.
I believe 100% that God put that vision in you and God put that vision in me because it's the perfect time.
Yeah,
perfect time.
The fact that the brothers and yourself were like praying for that and talking on that while I was also receiving that, again, is like, someone could say, oh, it's just a coincidence. It's like, no. There's no shot.
I'm excited. I'm
no
excited,
shot.
man, because this is exactly what this world needs.
Yeah.
Young men to become leaders.
Yeah. And what I believe is that it's God's design for us to be kings and be leaders, right? You know, Genesis in the Bible is like one of my favorite books. Actually, Genesis 1, one of my favorite chapters, that has so many insights. But one of my favorite verses from that is when God gives a command to be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, subdue it, and then finally have dominion, right? So God right there, just from day one, is saying have dominion, be a king, right? Be fruitful, multiply, be strong, be courageous, provide, protect, contribute, right? And so that's a direct call, a direct birthright. But the world has grown into a place that has distracted and blindfolded men from that birthright, so they don't see it and they don't grow into it.
It is a birthright to be kings, but we have to own our shit. And that's what it means. Own your shit. You have dominion. You have the power to change. You have the power to create your destiny. You're not a victim of your circumstances. You're the creator of your destiny. And if you believe in a higher power, it's up to you to make shit happen. So I'm excited, brother.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see all the young men's lives that you're going to change. I think God brought us together for a big purpose. And if you guys are interested of knowing more about it, just go in the link below, click on the link and find out more about what Matthew is doing. We support this movement 100%, and I can't wait to see what the next decade is going to look like for these young men who are coming to lead.
Amen. Let's go.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate being here.
Thank you.
If you found value in this podcast, make sure you subscribe and share, because the best is yet to come. Learn it, live it, experience it. Love life.
If you're ready to find the edge, go to kingscodebook.com to get the latest copy of my book, The King's Code. This book will help you find the clarity, the certainty, and the purpose that you need in order for you to lead with power. Go to kingscodebook.com and find your code to the edge now.